General Hospital spoilers and updates for the next 3 weeks hint at some danger for Maxie Jones as she faces kidnapping threats. Harrison Chase and Willow Tate strengthen their friendship, while Michael Corinthos becomes the object of manipulation. During the week of August 11th to 15th, Carly Spencer will confront Marco Rios, while Jason Morgan reconnects with Alexis Davis. Jason may inform Alexis that he needs to leave town for a bit, and ask her to keep an eye on Danny Morgan during his absence. Following that, Jason will travel to the Five Poppies Resort, where Britt Westbourne will face additional pressure for her lab work. Meanwhile, Jocelyn Jackson Vaughn will engage in their WSB recon operation, but Jocelyn may disobey orders, putting them in danger sooner or later. Meanwhile, GH teasers suggest that Vaughn and Jocelyn's connection may create some true sparks as they perform their marital act. Jason arrives to Five Poppies. Chase makes a regrettable arrest when Jason returns to the resort. He is desperate to find Britt, and will deceive a few Five Poppies employees along the way. Meanwhile, in Port Charles, Chase will confront the difficult challenge of making an arrest that he is hesitant about. Giovanni Gio Palmieri is likely to wind up in jail when the lab break-in operation goes bad. Drew Kane will most likely make another proposal about their future after meeting Willow. Willow may reject Drew's overture and tell Elizabeth Baldwin what occurred next. Chase's reconnection with Willow, Drew's manipulative return to Chase, he'll continue to bond with Willow and reveal some difficult news. Chase has recently provided a shoulder for Willow to depend on, and it is predicted that she will reciprocate, most likely when he is dealing with the crisis surrounding Joe's incarceration. As Chase develops a bond with Willow, Drew will try to manipulate Michael. Regardless of Drew's tactics, Michael will undoubtedly disapprove. Curtis Ashford will also receive a surprise, which may be tied to the insurance fraud inquiry that Drew initiated. Week of August 18th, Kai's grand gesture, Jason's reunion, and Jocelyn's danger. Stella Henry effectively negotiated the system numerous times to assist Martin Gray, but it may backfire due to Drew. Next, Kai Taylor is anticipated to make a huge gesture in order to repair his relationship with Trina Robinson. Meanwhile, Jason's clock will be ticking as he prepares to confront Britt. When they finally reconvene, Jason and Britt will have a question-and-answer session. Jocelyn's adventure with Vaughn will take a dangerous turn after Jason arrives in Dalmatia. It will be interesting to see whether Jason discovers Jocelyn's WSB assignment and complicates matters. Week of August 25th. Mystery bosses and possible rescue missions. The week of August 25th to 29th could reveal further information on the mystery boss. While there have already been multiple hints that Caesar Faison is still alive and in power. If things get too dangerous, Jason may need to develop an escape plan with Britt by his side. Jocelyn may also require assistance, especially if Vaughn is injured or experiences another setback. Meanwhile, Drew may be more bold and audacious in his attempts to get Willow back. Drew will also seek to engender terror in his adversaries, which will complicate Michael's situation. Drew's worst nightmare, Maxie's kidnapping danger. However, crossing Jen Sidwell's path might be a costly mistake. If pushed too far, Sidwell could become Drew's worst nightmare. Furthermore, Sidwell has some clout because he may depict Sonny Corinthos as having bribed the court to influence the custody decision. It's only a matter of time until Sidwell chooses to use that information to manipulate Sonny. In the coming weeks, he may also put Maxie in a difficult situation. There have been rumors that Maxie could be kidnapped, implying that Sidwell may go to extraordinary lengths to ensure she remains silent about the information regarding Sonny and keeps deception secure. Regardless of the circumstances, General Hospital spoilers indicate that Maxie will be temporarily removed from the storyline, so stay tuned for updates on her future. Britt Westbourne's clandestine escape from her mother, Liesl Obrecht, has GH viewers speculating about her motivations. Jason Morgan spotted Britt at a Paris airport and has since confirmed that she faked her January 2023 death by Heather Weber's poisoned hook, raising questions about whether Britt is shielding Liesl from the heartbreak of her Huntington's disease, or if she is pursuing a secretive plan in Dubrovnik, Croatia. Her stay at the Five Poppies Dalmatia Hotel, overseen by concierge Pascal, reveals a larger game. Britt's disappearance sparks fan debate. Britt's survival, as seen by Jason with her poppy-adorned bag, has sparked internet speculation about why she's hiding from her adoring mother. Fans theorize she staged her death, possibly with an antidote to Heather's hook, to spare Liesl the agony of watching her Huntington's progress, a selfless echo of her previous sacrifices. Others assume a secret objective, possibly related to a strange project in Dubrovnik, where Pascal's monitoring implies control. The Paris journey demonstrates that Brit is not entirely restricted against her will, but her secrecy raises concerns. Is she protecting her mother, or plotting to destroy the lives of those she once loved? Liesel's grief faces a painful truth as Brit lingers in Dubrovnik's shadows. Her absence greatly affects Liesel, unaware that her daughter lives on. Fans speculate that Brit's departure will protect Liesel from anguish, but a deeper motivation, such as a link to Professor Henry Hank Dalton's technology plot, looms. Is this technology related to Brit's prospective treatment in any way? Or is it possible that the cure already exists but Brit is being milked for work as a means of earning it? If Brit is hiding to avoid the agony of seeing Mom deteriorate, her return may elicit forgiveness, or vengeance. Will Liesel accept her daughter's decision or perceive it as betrayal? Will Brit's motives help or harm? The mystery surrounding Brit's departure from Liesel captivates us, and frankly it has us, the fans, questioning her heart. It makes complete sense that she would wish to protect her mother from the heartbreaking toll of watching her decline into death, but leaving so early while she still had lots of time before her condition worsened appears callous, if intentional. On the other side, Brit could be concealing a conspiracy that threatens their relationship, especially if the late Caesar Faison, who has returned from the dead, is involved in any way. We're expecting for a more unselfish deed on Brit's behalf to make all of this bearable for Liesel, who has been through enough, but supporters worry a surprise is on the way. The anxiety in Port Charles had been building for weeks, but today it seemed like the entire town was holding its breath. Maxie Jones had always been the type of woman who found herself in risky circumstances without even trying. But this time, the danger was not some distant threat or a stroke of bad luck. It was closing up on her with each step she took. She had been juggling her obligations at Deception, her children and her friendships, but now she was trapped in the middle of a game she had no idea she was playing. Every peek over her shoulder revealed the nagging suspicion that someone was following her. She didn't know the whole story yet, but if she did, she'd realize she was walking right into Drew Kane's worst nightmare. Drew had done his best to keep certain things hidden, but Port Charles was the type of place where the past never remained hidden for long. He had convinced himself that he could handle the situation, smooth over the gaps before anyone noticed, but Maxie had discovered something she wasn't allowed to see. The materials, stowed away in an unassuming-looking folder, were irrelevant at first glance. But Maxie was no stranger to secrets, and she could sniff when anything was wrong. She'd put them inside her luggage, assuring herself she'd give them to the appropriate person in the morning. Unfortunately for her, Drew had already discovered they were missing, making her his #1 concern. Michael Corinthos, meanwhile, had been coerced into a position he had not requested. On the surface, it appeared like he was in control, making decisions to safeguard his family and preserve Sonny's empire from collapsing. What Michael didn't realize was that he was being effectively exploited. The strings were being pulled from the shadows, and every decision he made was just what someone else desired. Michael didn't notice the tug, but it was strong enough to direct him exactly where they wanted him to go. The most hazardous aspect was that Michael believed he was acting on his own free will. He was a man who took pride in seeing the large picture, but right now the vast picture had already been painted for him, and every brushstroke was a lie. Maxie's pace quickened as she walked down the dimly illuminated pavement toward her apartment. She felt a nagging suspicion that she wasn't alone, and this wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. Port Charles had taught her to trust her instincts, which had saved her life more than once. Tonight, however, she was unsure whether she could outrun what was coming. Drew was pacing his own floor, his thoughts racing with worst-case scenarios. He didn't want to upset Maxie, but if she revealed what she knew, all he had worked for and risked would crumble. There were those who trusted him and relied on him. If they found out the truth, he would lose everything in an instant. Michael's role in all of this was anything but incidental. His relationship with Drew was always difficult. They had worked together and supported each other during times of difficulty, but their trust remained weak. Michael had been taught to believe that Drew was attempting to undermine him, and the seeds of doubt had been skillfully planted. Every piece of evidence Michael received seemed to corroborate that, and it was prompting him to act preemptively, only tightening the trap around him. The irony was that Drew wasn't out to ruin Michael just yet, but if Michael made the wrong move, Drew might be forced to act. Maxie eventually got to the door and struggled with her keys. She'd scarcely opened it when a shadow emerged from the darkness of the corridor. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but the figure stopped short of going inside. "We need to talk," the voice whispered quietly and urgently. "Drew." He was attempting to appear calm, but there was an edge to his tone that indicated she was in more trouble than she realized. She did not let him in. She didn't trust him enough for it, especially now. Instead, she rested against the doorframe with her arms folded. "If you're here about the files, you should know I've already made copies," she lied to see how he would respond. The muscle in his jaw clenched, and she realized she'd touched a nerve. Michael was sitting in his office, repeating a conversation he'd had earlier with a man who claimed to know about Drew's real agenda. The man had been imprecise, just suggestive enough to make Michael suspect but never clear enough to provide him with something substantial. That was by design. The more Michael thought about it, the more he realized he'd been correct all along to keep Drew at arm's length. If Drew was making moves behind his back, Michael needed to be prepared to counter them. He didn't realize that by preparing for an attack that would never happen, he was walking right into a strategy designed to destabilize both him and Drew at once. Maxie and Drew's conversation became heated. She wanted answers about the money transfers, the off-the-books meetings, and the people she didn't recognize in the images. Drew said she had no idea what she was getting herself into, and that the less she knew, the safer she would be. But Maxie had heard it before, and she knew it was simply another way of saying, "I'm hiding something from you." She also knew Drew was involved in something far bigger than himself. The dread in his eyes was not that of losing a business deal or a friendship, but of losing everything. Across town, Michael was placing a call that would set the following series of events in action. He was contacting someone in law enforcement, not an official but someone who worked in the gray areas of the law. He wanted Drew's details right away. What he didn't realize was that his call had been expected. The persons controlling him had made sure that the information he would get was properly curated. It would all point to Drew as a threat that needed to be destroyed, pitting Michael directly against him in an irreversible manner. Maxie's phone vibrated in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and saw Michael's name but did not respond. She could not. Not with Drew standing in front of her, observing every movement. She was aware that Michael was dealing with his own issues, and that telling him what she had might exacerbate his situation. At the same time, she was unsure if she could do this alone. If she made the wrong decision, she could lose more than just her safety, her life. Drew eventually stepped back to give her space, but his warning lingered in the air. "Maxie, you're in over your head. Walk away while you still can." Then he vanished, his footsteps vanishing into the darkness. Maxie bolted the door, her hands shaking, and leaned against it for support. She didn't want to acknowledge it, but he was correct. She was in over her head. Nonetheless, she was not going to walk away. Not now. Not when she was so close to understanding what was going on. Michael, meantime, was staring out his office window, the city lights extending out in front of him. He thought he was protecting himself and his family, but every action he made just led him more into the trap. Drew was the immediate aim, but Michael remained the long-term prize. And if someone didn't figure it out quickly, they'd all lose. The game in Port Charles was changing, and Maxie, Drew, and Michael were all caught in the middle, each believing they were making their own decisions when in fact someone else was making them for them. The question wasn't about who would win. The question was, who will survive? Britt's disappearance sent shockwaves around Port Charles, creating a mystery that was equal parts confusing and frightening. Those who knew her well were torn between thinking she was behaving out of great selflessness and shrewd self-interest. The days preceding up to her disappearance were replete with little, easily noticed signs, fleeting glances over her shoulder, the way her phone appeared to stay glued to her palm, her unexpected evasiveness in talks that had previously flowed freely. Even in the hospital halls, where she used to strut confidently, she moved more cautiously, her eyes monitoring the boundaries of each passageway as if expecting danger to leap out at her. But in her final visible moments, there was an evident spark of purpose, which did not quite match the idea of a lady fleeing out of fear. Liesl, Britt's mother, found the situation both upsetting and frustrating. Liesl Albrecht was not the kind to express vulnerability lightly, but her daughter's absence affected her more deeply than she would ever admit publicly. Liesl's mind raced, jumping between the notion that Britt had fled to shield her from an invisible menace and the darker, more disturbing option that Britt was manipulating events for some unknown purpose. Liesl was no stranger to sophisticated schemes. She had planned enough of them to recognize the warning signs, but this time she was out of control. This time, she was on the outside, anxiously trying to decipher hints that may or may not have been purposefully left behind. Jason Morgan, who had a troubled history with Britt, was among the first to notice the inconsistencies. He'd seen her act rashly before, but this felt deliberate, as if every step had been part of a plan put in motion long before the rest of them recognized it. Jason's intuition told him Britt's actions were motivated by someone else's safety, possibly Liesl's, but his gut also warned him there was more at risk than anybody was revealing. Britt was not the sort to give up everything without a backup plan. If she was gone, she was either receiving powerful assistance or purposefully placing herself in the path of danger in order to acquire leverage. At General Hospital, the departure of Britt's sharp wit and no-nonsense leadership left a hole. Colleagues talked in the break rooms, swapping theories as if they were imparting sensitive information. Some assumed she had been kidnapped, and the lack of ransom requests was only an indication that her captors were biding their time. Others assumed that she had discovered something evil, terrible enough to force her underground. Some even suspected she had staged her own abduction, possibly as part of a pact or to settle an old score. The truth was that no one truly understood Britt's mind well enough to predict her movements with precision, and that uncertainty was the most unnerving aspect. Liesl's emotions changed by the hour. One moment she was convinced her daughter's disappearance was a deliberate ploy to protect her from an impending danger, and the next she was pacing her apartment, muttering under her breath about Britt's potential treachery. Liesl understood better than anybody else how devotion might be tested when life was on the line. She'd spent her life balancing loyalty and self-preservation, but the emotional weight of feeling her daughter had lied to her, even if it was for a good purpose, grew heavier with each passing day. Dante Falconeri took an official interest in the case, but his personal ties to several of the major characters made his probe laden with emotional pitfalls. His initial results were frustratingly ambiguous. Britt's phone last pinged near the waterfront, her bank accounts showed no traces of unusual withdrawals, and security footage captured only fleeting glimpses of her in the hours before her disappearance. But there were other factors that didn't add up. The missing set of keys from her residence, the unexpected deletion of various files from her hospital computer, and the fact that her passport was disappeared. These clues presented an image of someone who was prepared to leave, rather than being taken away unexpectedly. Spinelli, brought in informally by Jason, discovered hints of encrypted interactions in Britt's emails. The language was vague and the recipients were disguised, but there was a pattern phrases that, when decoded, appeared to hint to a rendezvous or meeting of some sort. The locations were different, each one a step further from Port Charles, as if she were planning an escape route. It wasn't apparent whether the purpose was to flee or run toward danger. Spinelli felt she had made touch with someone deep in the criminal underworld, possibly a person from her past who had resurfaced with an offer she couldn't refuse. Meanwhile, Liesl's mind kept going back to former foes. She had a long list of people who would gladly harm her and her daughter. Despite the fact that Victor Cassadine was apparently gone, his shadow lingered in her thoughts. Liesl knew better than to think the Cassadines were totally out of the picture. Their reach was extensive, and their patience legendary. If Britt had learned anything about Victor's unfinished business, or if she had uncovered another Cassadine plot in the works, her disappearance may be part of an attempt to demolish it from within. Britt's recent behavior, on the other hand, revealed that a personal motive was also at play. During chats with friends, she appeared inattentive and even remorseful at times. When she spoke about Liesl in the days leading up to her disappearance, there was an unsaid tension, as if she was concealing a fact too deadly to reveal. This made Liesl doubt if Britt's leaving was really for her protection. If Britt had discovered knowledge that put Liesl in immediate danger, fleeing might have been the only way to divert the threat away. Jason contemplated this possibility as well, but it was difficult to dismiss the potential that Britt was in over her head. She was resourceful, undoubtedly, But the forces lurking in the shadows of Port Charles were not to be ignored. He began recreating her final week steps, including visits to the hospital archives, late-night meetings at odd coffee shops, and an unusual overnight journey out of town. Each hint appeared to indicate to purposeful planning, and the precision of it all suggested Britt had been putting things in place for a long time. The people closest to her began to separate into camps. One camp saw Britt's departure as an act of ultimate sacrifice, a method to keep her loved ones safe while she addressed something hazardous on her own terms. The other believed she was playing a longer game, one that could lead to treachery. Liesl herself was torn between the two views, her love for her daughter, and her intuitive suspicion of sophisticated conspiracies. As the days passed into weeks, the trail began to cool. The initial rush of haste gave way to a persistent fear that they might never know the whole truth. But there were small signs that Britt was still alive. An anonymous donation to a medical research fund she had once supported, a postcard sent to a hospital colleague from an unknown location, and a phone call to Liesl's apartment in the middle of the night, with nothing but the sound of the ocean on the other end. Liesl clung to these clues, interpreting them as confirmation that her daughter was alive and moving through the world on purpose, even if that purpose was hidden in mystery. What made the mystery even more frustrating was that Britt's disappearance began to have repercussions throughout Port Charles. Secrets that had been kept secret while she was present began to emerge, financial inconsistencies in hospital budgets, whispers of a hidden lab experiment she had been involved in, and the unexpected appearance of strangers asking inquiries about her background. It was as if taking Britt out of the equation had loosened the bonds that held a web of secrets together, and now everything was unraveling. The fundamental question remained. Was Britt's disappearance a shield or a sword? Was she acting to protect her mother and friends, or was she on her own hidden mission, one that may eventually pit her against those she cared about? Those who loved her could only hope that, whatever her plan, she would come out of the shadows before it was too late. And yet, for all the hope they held, an underlying fear lingered. Sometimes when people disappear into the darkness, they don't return the same, if at all. The uncertainty affected everyone differently. Liesl roamed her rooms at night, tracing the edges of old images. Jason remained focused on discovering new leads, even when they appeared to dry up. Dante combed through innumerable reports, hoping that one overlooked information would crack the case open. Spinelli proceeded to sift through encrypted texts, convinced that Britt had left a trail of puzzle pieces waiting for someone intelligent enough to put them together. If Britt was out there orchestrating something from afar, she did so with the precision of someone who understood the risks and was willing to risk everything to see it through. No one in Port Charles could say if the risk was for Liesl's safety or her own covert objective. Until she returned, they could only speculate on which version of Britt they might see again, the protector or the plotter.